So, full disclosure up front, you might have heard the accent a little bit there. I'm not from around here. Um, I'm from Sydney, Australia. And moving to Missouri, I don't know, it was such an amazing thing for me, but to be somewhere where you can just pick up a rock and it's got fossils in it is just amazing to me, because in Sydney, Australia, you don't have that. So you've got this amazing resource here, and I'm delighted to at least present a little bit about the rocks here that I've had a bit of a steep learning curve with myself. To start off with, how many people recognize this structure? Hands up. Only one or two. Okay. Yeah. It's a very slender looking thing. Kind of looks like a bunch of lightsabers, if you know that particular candy, stacked on one on top of the other. So this is a lovely crinoid stem, and I took this picture just next to California Island, which is one of the banks along the Missouri River. Okay. So there are just fossils everywhere around here. Okay, it's a little washed out, so apologies. I do have a better map coming up, but I wanted to kick us off with a bit of basics about the geology of Missouri. Okay, this map is just a general map of the basement rocks that we find approximately at the surface today. Over here, we've got the legend going from our oldest rocks to our youngest rocks. Missouri is great, actually, because you get this wonderful time slice across from essentially the Ozarks through right to the top sort of western corner, with just this really, really steady sort of slope of the layers of rock. Okay, that when shaven down over time gives you different time slices going from older rocks to younger rocks as you move across the state. So it's great. It's actually great. There are a lot of places where you don't get any of that. Kansas is a bit like that. You get pretty much flat. It's very flat. I've experienced the true Kansas flat now, and it is quite flat. But you get a nice gradation here. Okay, let's talk some geologic time here. Okay, so I've made the reference to time, well, time slices. The way we divide time is generally into these large packages called eras. Okay, we've got the Paleozoic, the Mesozoic, and the Cenozoic being the ones where we actually have really complex life. Okay, and I love this analogy that was illustrated by Ray Troll. You'll see it all over the internet. The only thing about this that I'll point out is exaggeration of time in terms of the duration of things. So the Cenozoic up here is only 65 million years, whereas from the Mesozoic or across the Mesozoic, this is closer to 190 million years of time, and then this is closer to 290 million years. So this little bit has been kind of squished. And in Missouri, we're actually missing a good portion of material from this time up the top here. And most of what we're seeing is, in my humble opinion, the best time slice, okay? The Paleozoic. This is before dinosaurs emerged. This is before mastodons, although we'll get to that in a little bit. We're missing, yeah, a good chunk of this. And really, we kind of get everything from the Cambrian through to the Pennsylvanian. And over here, this is a great book that I'll highlight a couple of times. This is the Roadside Geology of Missouri. Okay, I know we're going to do Creekside Geology of Missouri tonight, but this is a great reference if anybody is interested in learning a bit more about geology across Missouri. So here we have those time slices in Missouri. Over here we have all of the formations of rock, maybe not all of them, but a lot of them throughout these time slices. I'm not going to delve into all of these. In fact, I'm going to only just touch on one or two. And you can see that we've also got a list of fossils here. So you can look back at that or reference that particular book. Something I want to mention at this stage, which I think is important to the whole story of Missouri, is, and not just Missouri, but like the whole of the United States, is that the continental mass that we know as North America has experienced time and time again this inundation of the sea. Okay, so through time, we've had sea level rise and fall, and we were actually able to map out the extent to which the North American, what we call craton, which is essentially the major continental landmass, has been flooded or exposed. And this was actually done by Lawrence Sloss, okay? He developed these sequences that he actually named across time. You'll see our time scale over here on the right-hand side again. Over here, we have a nifty little sort of relative sea level rise curve with our line in the middle here representing the present day. And something I want to note is that through time, you'll see that actually, for the most part, sea level's been really high, really high. The present is pretty low by comparison. So when we look at this part of this image, we've got these kind of brownish colors. This is the extent of the North American continent that is exposed above sea level. And then when you see this little part sort of coming in on the east and west coast, that is sea level moving onto the continent. So you can see it going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. In fact, there are times of during the Ordovician where almost the entire continent was flooded, okay? So we can see this, and we've recreated this through time. We've got a couple of paleographic maps. These are wonderful maps that show Missouri through a couple of key time slices that I'm going to talk about today. And again, you can see that this North American craton or continental mass has been inundated with various seaways, sometimes none at all, and all through different time periods. Okay, and I know it's flipping through pretty quickly, but don't worry, I'll go through them a little quicker. Sorry, a little slower. Okay. Okay, I much prefer this map of Missouri in terms of the color scheme that we're using for geological divisions and timescale divisions, just because it's a lot of blue, and the blue indicates marine strata or marine layers of rock. Okay, so what you can see here is that most of Missouri is covered in rock that was formed in marine settings. Okay. And of course, we're talking about the Missouri River today. So I've tried to break this down with the help of my husband into sort of sections along the Missouri River through our state based on the MR340. Okay, so come on, it's got to be topical. So we've got the KC to Glasgow section, okay, and then the Glasgow to Hartsburg, Hartsburg to Weldon, Weldon to St. Louis. Now, unfortunately, my geography is not fantastic, but I've tried to do this roughly where we get transitions across geological time periods. So the KC to Glasgow is mostly Pennsylvanian. Then we get into the Glasgow-Hartsburg, which is Mississippian, a tiny bit of Devonian. Then we get into the Hartsburg-Weldon, which is predominantly Ordovician. Sorry, I'm skipping the Silurian. There's really not that much of it around here. It's there, it's just hard to find. And then we've got our Weldon to St. Louis section where we actually re-enter the Pennsylvanian. But you'll see it's a different Pennsylvanian, okay? All right. Very washed out map, sorry. But I wanted to start off with KC, okay? This is where the race starts. And unfortunately, you're not going to actually see a lot of bluffs around here. You don't see a lot of geology. This is because in this part of the Missouri River, the river's done its job, essentially, which is eroding a lot of the surrounding topography flat. And so we only really see evidence of bluffs way, way, way back away from the river itself. Okay, so all of this, so this is actually exposed here. This is, you could walk across here. This is a nice cross section. And again, can't really see the map, but imagine we got Kansas City here and we've got a nice cross section across Kansas City. We've taken a big old slice like a cake and we're looking down at the layers underneath Kansas City. This over here is the Missouri River. We've got some bluffs that are well sort of off to the side. And all of this below it is Pennsylvanian. Okay, and there's loads of different formations, loads of different cycles of sedimentation. Now, what does that actually translate to when we look at the faunas, when we look at what was going on during this time? Missouri, which is essentially right here, was in kind of something like the Mediterranean today. It was a little enclosed sea. There was a little bit of land, a kind of small island off to the east. And we've got a shallow sea. This sea is beautiful. We're actually right on the tropics here. So Laurentia, the tropics actually go through here. So the equator is through here. This has been oriented a little bit odd. So north is pointing kind of towards that top left-hand corner. But yeah, we've got the equator going right through here. It would have been a great place to be, scuba diving or snorkeling amongst the rays. We have fish at this stage. Okay, so some nice fish, lots of sharks, but generally small sharks. We haven't got to the big scary ones yet. So small sharks, lots of fish, and loads of crinoids. And I'll show you how to identify those in a little bit. Okay, so very nice, good spot. Okay, then we get into the Glasgow Hartsburg section, which is much closer to here. So this is kind of your local Columbia area. People might recognize the Manitou Bluffs, Eagle Bluffs, beautiful, beautiful sections of exposed geology. Most of these here are Mississippian in age, okay? So we're getting older. We're going from Pennsylvanian down into Mississippian. It's much older. Again, a little washed out here, but we're in pretty shallow water for the most part of this. Oh, and I should mention, this is Devonian, so this is actually getting even older still. Lots and lots of corals at this stage. There are loads and loads of corals around here. It's great. Lots of solitary corals. We've got some colonial corals here. And it's a big time for corals. You think that we're in an age of corals right now? We've got the Great Barrier Reef, we've got Caribbean. No, it doesn't even compare to the Devonian. The Devonian was the apex of corals. Okay. All right. As we move further along, Hartsburg to Weldon, we get into skipping the Silurian, Ordovician. And at this point, we're really, really high sea level. Okay, so a lot of North America is covered in these very shallow seas, very warm, shallow seas. Beautiful, perfect, again, for marine life. Marine life loves shallow seas. Here's Missouri. There's a little island there. Anybody have an idea of what the island might be? It's the Ozarks. Okay, the Ozarks. The Ozarks are just a tiny little island, and I have to say they've been an island for a pretty long time. They were an island during the Cambrian period as well. That's where we get a lot of our lead, zinc deposits from, is in Cambrian stuff. But we're not going down to the Cambrian. That's too far out of the map. Okay, so at this stage, we've got these shallow seas, we've got these huge nautiloids, okay? And these things are like 3 feet across, maybe even 4 feet long. They're huge. Still got crinoids around, lots and lots of trilobites. And another thing about these deposits, which is kind of unusual compared to the rest of this particular time, is we get a lot of dolomite. Dolomite and limestone are cut from the same cloth. Limestone is a mineral called calcium carbonate. That's what shells are made of. Dolomite is similar, but we've replaced a particular atom, the calcium atom, with a magnesium atom. And it makes them really, really, really hard to erode, okay? The reason why we get that, still open to debate. If you want to talk about that afterwards, I'm happy to chat dolomite. Okay, then we get to the Weldon St. Louis section, all right? And again, we're down here, but we're now moving on to the terrestrial portion, meaning the land portion of this little island, okay? And during this particular period, again, we've jumped back from Ordovician back into Pennsylvanian. The Pennsylvanian Mississippian are, the Pennsylvania Mississippian are carboniferous, okay? This is when trees, plants go ballistic, okay? They are everywhere. They're not the only ones that go ballistic. There's lots of insects that go ballistic. We get giant dragonflies and huge centipedes, giant spiders. Not my preferred era to be around. But you do get these beautiful, beautiful forests of and when I say forest, they are forests, but they're mostly marshlands. Plants are still getting used to the idea of living on land, so they like swampy areas. Over here, we're probably a little bit out of the swamp. We do still get swampy fossils, but they're a little less frequent. We do get floodplain deposits across here with a lot of horsetails, which are, I guess, they're just like a sort of water plant. We've got lots and lots of erosion coming off of the highlands that surround us at this particular point in time. Okay. Right. What about the Missouri? When does the Missouri River actually show up? Well, the Missouri River is pretty late on the scene, as it turns out. The Missouri, well, I should say, we have a lot of drainage from the ice sheets coming off sort of in the Quaternary. There we go. Sorry, that's a little, I'm more deep time. This is way too recent for me. But the Quaternary, we've got a lot of ice sheets covering North America. We've got drainage down through sort of past the Rockies. And the Missouri River doesn't actually start to trend east until about 115,000 years ago. For the most part, it had been draining south. Another thing I should mention is the reason why Missouri, the north of Missouri, is very flat and we get a lot of Pennsylvanian fossils and we're not seeing as much in the creek beds is because those ice sheets extended pretty much all the way down nearly to Columbia, just north of Columbia, and removed all of the topography. They're basically like these giant conveyor belts that just churn sediment and smooth everything out. So it's flat to the north of us and it's flat to the west of us because we used to have a large inland sea. So that's why Kansas is so flat. Okay, now, bit of fun, where to find fossils. I see already that there are a lot of people picking through creeks. Absolutely. Creeks are the best place to find fossils. Rivers, creeks, they're doing the work for you. They're getting the material out, they're reworking it, they're exposing all sorts of lovely fossils. So absolutely go to the creeks, find things there. Also, not as many permitting issues when it comes to creeks, okay? They're kind of open generally to a lot of public use. Roadside geology is another good one, hence an entire book dedicated to roadside geology. But I will emphasize that it can be dangerous, okay? Be very careful to move away from the road and wear very reflective or bright clothing. Old and repurposed quarries are another spot. The issue I have with quarries is that usually they're like so sheer-sided, they're kind of like bluffs. You can't collect from that material. It's really hard to get at it. So the older, the better, because it's actually weathered a little bit, and you can kind of cut into it. So this particular one is at Cosmo Park. It's just behind the Boone Quarry's large active quarry. And beautiful Burlington limestone here, or Bentonville, depending on who you talk to. All right, let's talk fossils. Okay, this is more my wheelhouse. Fossils, how do they form? If we're really simplifying things, fossils love to form in quiet environments. Now, quiet environments are usually like areas where you've got some sort of lake, a seabed, just quiet and not agitated. Here we've got a fish, okay? It's already been decomposed. The fish has died, there's been a bit of bacterial activity, it's sunk to the bottom, and we've just got the skeleton exposed. As sediment is created, moved around by a very gentle oscillatory sort of movement of waves and whatnot, it will gradually form sediment on top of our fish, our dead fish. And it will bury it in a quiet environment. We want to keep it away from things that are prone to like eating remains, and crabs and things are a good example of things that like to come along and just tear stuff apart. So we get our fossil fish now buried. Over time, we'll actually see those layers of rock get uplifted by other activities of continents coming together, moving apart. At the same time, we might even see some pore fluids in these sediments move through the rock and infill some of the bone spaces in these, okay? And then eventually it will be exposed by erosion and weathering, and we can collect it at the surface, okay? Now, this is a very bone-specific example. I don't work on vertebrates. I'm a marine biologist of the paleontology world. So I'm more concerned with shells of mollusks, brachiopods, trilobites, corals, crinoids. So these are actually the more commonplace things that I come across. Things like molds and casts. So here is a shell, okay? We recognize a good old shell. What happens with shells, because they are composed of calcium carbonate, is they dissolve, sadly. It's such a shame. But before they dissolve, they often will infill with some sort of sediment, okay? So if they infill with sediment, we get a nice mold, okay? This is a nice internal mold. And sometimes you also get an external mold where the surrounding sediment has left the impression of that shell. This is what you see a lot of around here, molds and casts. The other thing that can happen, like I was talking about here with our fish and pore fluids moving through the sediment, is you'll get these fluids that are filled with different atoms and usually ions like silica and pyrite, or I should say silica and iron. When silica meets oxygen, it forms this lovely glassy sort of material. Pyrite is iron and sulfur. Now, pyrite can become a bit tenuous. it's not that nice to hold on to for too long, but it does give you these glorious, beautiful fossils. This is essentially fool's gold here, okay? And what's happened is that the silica has typically either infilled the space between the external and the internal mold to give you this shell, or it has actually replaced the entire shell itself. And there's many different ways that can happen. All right, let's get into some fun parts. We're going to now walk through a couple of the common Missouri fossils, okay? Starting off with our rugose corals. And I have a couple of these here, and you're most welcome to come up afterwards and have a look at these. So I've got rugose corals. These are pretty typical from, I want to say, the Ordovician through to the Permian. Sadly, a lot of things go extinct at the Permian. It's called the mass dying. It's when 95% of life died on Earth. And we see a resurgence, and then another 75% of life dies when the dinosaurs die out. Okay, so we've got our solitary corals here. We call these horn corals. They have these wonderful internal septa, okay? This is a cross-section of one that has been partially replaced by silica. This is another one where we've kind of got a transverse section here, sort of cropped out. Beautiful septa, and I think these are actually tabulae here. All right, here's your more colonial form. This is Acrocanthus. A lot of older literature will call it Lithostroma. And these, like modern corals, have a calyx. It's more of a corallite, actually. I don't know why they call this calyx. I'm pretty sure it's called a corallite. But the corallite is where the individual animal lived. Now, these are cnidarians, meaning they're jellyfish. Okay, so imagine a jellyfish, and its tentacles are pointing outwards. Okay, so they're pointing out like this. So individual jellyfish in each one of these corallites here, okay? All right, then we get our tabulate corals, more jellyfish-like things. These are only differentiated by the size of the corallites. They're very small, very, very small. A lot of hexagonal ones, but we also get these beautiful, what we call pipe organ corals, and they do look like a whole bunch of chains, essentially, that are long pipe organ-like things. Absolutely gorgeous. This is Favostella. Common from the Ordovician around here. Unfortunately, I don't know the exact locality for this specimen, but it's actually figured, this exact specimen is figured in this book here, which is another thing I should mention to you. This is rather old now, and I think the latest reprint of it was 1999. But this is one of the few, and perhaps the only, Missouri fossils book that exists sort of generally. This one is called The Common Fossils of Missouri by Unklesby, and it was published originally in 1973. Okay. Crinoids. Okay, now we're getting good stuff. Crinoids are everywhere, right? I think everybody can find a crinoid. You'd be hard pressed not to find a crinoid in Missouri. It is the Missouri state fossil, after all. It's no longer Delacrinus. It is now Epeirosocrinus missouriensis is the new state fossil. Sorry, I shouldn't say new. It is the state fossil, just has been updated in its taxonomy. I have a couple of pictures here of it. These are some really nice prepped out ones. I'm sorry, this comes from Iowa. I know, but this is something I've noticed about Missouri is you see beautiful, beautiful specimens of Missouri fossils, but you never see them in Missouri. You see them in like the Smithsonian museums and all these museums elsewhere. So we need to bring them back and show them off here. But some basics on crinoids. We've got our holdfast, okay, and this is in reference to stalked crinoids, okay, which make up a lot of the older crinoids, but actually crinoids today mostly, I should say carefully, yes, mostly, because abundance-wise, there are more non-stalked crinoids than there are stalked crinoids, but they still exist today. How cool is that? And they swim around. They're beautiful when you watch them swim. Anyhow, I'm getting past the point here. We've got holdfasts, okay? This is to hold them and root them into the sediment because the sediment is loose and moving around. They've got to really like root themselves in. Then we've got our columnal or our stalk, our stalk, which is made up of columnals. And then we've got our crown, and this is the feeding apparatus. These things weren't nasty or anything. They were just feeding off of particulate material that was floating in the water column, okay, in the ocean. But columnals are probably the thing you come across most. You'll occasionally get this arboreal cup, also known as a calyx. And then the arms are very delicate structures. And so it's pretty rare that you get them preserved, but it is possible. So here are a couple of Missouri specimens. We've got, I'm not going to go through all of the specific genus names. It took me a while to hunt these down, honestly. But some common ones that you'll see, these are the cups, okay, so the calyx, Mississippian aged across the top here. This is Burlington limestone, which is most of what you find around here. Again, could be Bentonville, but I'm going to call it Burlington because that's what you find in the literature. It's still the predominant name. So Burlington limestone is places like Rockbridge is mostly Burlington limestone. Yeah, Rockbridge, and also Cosmo Park. We've got some beautiful basal attachment structures here of Asiocernus from North Kansas City. So there are nice places out in Kansas City. We just got to find them. Okay. Again, this is more like what you're going to see around here, crinoid soup. So this is a chunk of Burlington limestone here. And it's the one that I've got figured up here as well. But you can see loads and loads of individual ossicles. Okay, these are the columnals that make up the stalk itself. Each of these stack on top of each other. They are so gorgeous. And I wanted to highlight this football-shaped one here. This is Platycrines, and it actually spirals when you look at the full articulated specimen. Oh, absolutely spectacular. You do find these though around here, really gorgeous. So keep an eye out for those. These ones that I've got figured here are preserved as calcite, meaning that they're maybe not the original material, but they're pretty close to it. Okay, so we've got our preserved calcite forms, and we've also got molds that we see a lot in chert. There's loads of chert around here. Most of it has formed in association with these tiny microscopic, we call them radiolarians. They're actually ancient plants. They're mostly planktonic. But when those things dissolve and get redistributed as pore water, they often create these cherts. Okay, blastoids. Blastoids are a cousin, I'd like to say, of the crinoids. And there were actually a couple figured back here. This is a little blastoid here. Oh, maybe that's the only one I got there. Anyhow, so blastoids, similar, also stalked, didn't have quite the arm structures that our lovely crinoids have. You very rarely will see these little short arms, we'll say, the brachials on the sides. They have this main theca, which is more often than not what you get. And they're quite small. You do get bigger ones. I've seen them up to about an inch. This is actually a lovely one here. Again, I don't have the exact site, but I know it is Burlington limestone. So we're in the Mississippian. So keep an eye out for these. They're little gems. Okay, sea urchins, again, another cousin of the crinoid. These are all echinoderms. Sea urchins still around today. We've got modern echinoids here. Some you can see, well, they're often preserved with their what am I saying? They often have spines. Okay, so in life, they have these lovely spines coming out of them. But after death, they often drop those spines. We don't see them as nicely. So you'll end up with the main sort of urchin skeleton. But you can find individual spines, and these ones are great. Archaeosideris. I've seen these in outcrop. They are here up at Finger Lakes. You can see a couple in some of the old quarry. These are just spiny little clubs. They're really sweet. That's an inch there. Okay, so they're about an inch long. Okay, gastropods, nautiloids, and clams are all part of the class Mollusca. Okay, good old mollusks. They're a very diverse group. Unfortunately, maybe not as well. Well, they're a little more difficult to find around here. Maybe not so much the snails, but certainly some of our nautiloids. And these are large. Again, this is in inches across the top here. So these are these large Endoceras, okay? Lovely nautiloids. They had a squid coming out the end here, okay? And then clams, good old clams. They're around, but not very diverse. More often than not, you're going to see brachiopods. My goodness, there are brachiopods for days here. And loads of different types. I'm admittedly not a brachiopod expert, but we get beautiful, beautiful deposits. So this again is from Finger Lakes. You can come up and have a look at it afterwards, but we've got this is from a channel deposit in the Mississippian at Finger Lakes, and it's really interesting because they're all facing perfectly up. It's some sort of hard or semi-hard sea floor that they were really liked, and they just cemented into it. It's pretty neat. Okay, bryozoans, loads of bryozoans around here as well. And you get different types. You get the kind of fan looking ones. They're kind of cross-hatched like this. They're usually very flat. But you also get this lovely one. And actually somebody brought this up earlier. This is Archimedes. You find it across a lot of North America in Mississippian rocks. And it's essentially a corkscrew. More often than not, you're going to get this corkscrew, and sometimes it actually falls entirely out and you'll just see the corkscrew and it's not embedded in rock. But if you can see these lines here, they actually had these beautiful frondose bits that came out from the edge of the corkscrew. And all of these are colonies of tiny, tiny, tiny little filter feeding organisms. Another favorite is Evactinopora. Oh, this is a gem. If you find this, you're doing a great job. These are little stars, essentially. They're just individual bryozoan colonies. They look like little stars. They're beautiful. So keep an eye out for them. Very common in the Fern Glen Formation, which we mostly see out towards St. Louis. Okay, trilobites, they're kind of the rock stars of the Paleozoic. Everybody loves a good trilobite. I've got a really nice one over here. This is the same one figured. So this is Isotelus, huge, like these are big, big trilobites. Most trilobites that you find around here are like maybe this big, maybe this big. This is a monster, but it was probably pretty tame, you know, just eating like leftover sort of detritus and grossness. They kind of took the role that crabs have today. Now, in reality, these are arthropods, which means they shed their skin, like what we were seeing with all those cicadas around, cicadas around. You know, they shed their skins, or not their skins, they shed their shells. And trilobites did the same thing. And so when you look for these in the fossil record, you're seeing a lot of the molt parts usually disarticulated. So you'll get like just bits of the head and the tail, or the pygidium. All right. Also, just quickly, why do we call them trilobites? It's not because they have a head, a thorax, and a pygidium. It's actually because they have 3 lobes. All right, just your fun fact for trivia if you ever need it. All right, plant fossils, as I mentioned, the Pennsylvanian, and to a certain extent the Mississippian as well, but the Pennsylvania is big time plant. We get beautiful scale trees. Okay, these are big trees, and their bark looks like these kind of diamond scales. So this is a nice specimen of Lepidodendrum. Okay, so this is part of a trunk. We also get calamites. Calamites are these horsetails. Horsetails look a bit like this today. Calamites is essentially actually the fossil of the interior of these horsetails, more often than not. We also get some nice ferns. Ferns are very common. You're not going to see grass. Grass doesn't exist at this stage. Okay, grass is a very modern thing. You might see some petrified wood. I've already seen petrified wood today, and yes, petrified wood is around. I'm not sure where it comes from. Yet to find out. Okay, then the evil ones, the pseudo-fossils, the fake fossils, okay? The ones to keep your eyes out for. I get a lot of questions about these. And the main ones that come up, there's so many of them, but the main ones that come up are things like this and this, okay? These are nodules, okay? This one is a septarian nodule. It has lots of cracks in it that gives it this really interesting surface texture, kind of makes it look like a coral, but it's just a nodule. And the way these form is usually there's a sort of central locus for minerals to precipitate around, much later than the fossil ever formed, okay? So there might be like a grain or maybe even a tiny little fossil at the center of this nucleus, but you're essentially building this layer of minerals around it. That's how you get agates and things like that. But some don't take that perfect circular form. They take forms around long things that look like fossils. This thing, I love this. I actually have this over here. It's my favorite pseudo-fossil because it looks so much like a bone, and it's not. This is a iron, what was it? Yeah, it's an iron concretion. It's an unusual one. I think it might actually be a burrow, and it's just, again, we've had a lot of iron and sulfur mixing together and forming this concretion in a burrow. And then we get our man-made concretions, and these are fun. This is my favorite. I received this in an email, and I was like, what is this blue thing? It's about this big. It's got lots of strange kind of grooves in it. So it turns out that this is not too far away from a Ford factory where they were dumping paint out. And the paint was making its way into crevices and whatnot, and made its way into a stream, got tumbled around a bit, and formed this lovely looking pseudofossil. We also get a lot of iron slag, not so much a problem for fossils, but oh man, the mineralogists in my department get hit with a lot of questions about meteorites because it kind of looks like a meteorite, and a lot of it is metallic, and it will have sort of a magnetic signature. The other thing is these dendrites. They look a lot like beautiful sort of fronds, but they're not. They're actually just a mineral precipitating out of solution, usually along the very edge of some sort of rock. Okay. All right. So how do we get involved in more fossil stuff? I want to bring to your attention this wonderful app. It's called the Rocked app. It's like social media for rock hounds. It really is a great resource, and I think it's underappreciated, hence why I want to talk about it. But it gives you the bedrock geology that you're standing on. So you use GPS and you can look at essentially what formation you're on. Really, really neat. I'll draw your attention to a new fossil hunters Facebook page. It's relatively new, like 2020, I think, and maybe a little older. But this is headed by a colleague of mine, Asa, who is also a part of the Eastern Missouri Society for Paleontology. There is a group in Kansas. I just don't know them all that well, and I need to get in contact with them. But this group here is really great. They've been doing a lot of great outreach work. We sadly lost kind of one of the esteemed paleontologists, Bruce Stitchcomb, just recently. And so we're all pretty sad about that. He was, he knew so much about Missouri and actually bought up large plots of land around Missouri just for fossil foraging. So a man after my own heart. So those are some things. And oh, there you go. Thank you. By the way, I'm very excited to get up the back here and help identify some of these fossils. I will be around after that, and I'll be around to chat here. But any questions?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, do a lot of mineralization and fossilization mineralization and fossilization are terms that get thrown around a lot. I'm just
Yes.
curious, is it basically the same, or is it, could you describe it?
Yeah, so mineralization is like a subset. It's under the broad umbrella of fossilization. So, and I'd be hesitant to call it mineralization, more replacement. And yeah, so things like the silica and the pyrite, those are silicification and pyritization, which are a form of mineralization. And they're a small subset of the whole, I guess, variety of different ways that something can be formed. Because then we also have carbonization, which is where all of the carbon is concentrated and a lot of the volatile organics removed from a fossil. What are some other things? Permineralization is another one, which is where it's actually silica, again, silica doing its thing, but entering into porous spaces like bone and cellular tissues. So yeah, mineralization is a very broad term, fossilization broader. Yep. Yeah.
Jefferson City Church it's called Oolitic Church.
Oolitic? Yep.
Oolitic chert.
Yes.
Is the oolitic appearance, the dotty appearance, are those fossils?
Mm-hmm. So no, I'd call them coated grains. And typically they're forming, this is a tricky one because we get a lot of oolitic stuff today in the Bahamas, and it's forming in these shallow waters that are hyper calcified. So we've got lots and lots of calcium and also available carbonate to form coatings on individual grains. Some folks will say that this is biologically mediated by some sort of microbial action. So it's not necessarily your typical multicellular fossil, but it could be microbial. And I think the chert forms that you're seeing are replaced as well by a mineral. So they would have originally been calcium carbonate, and then they were replaced by silica. Yeah. Oh my goodness.
If I could just say, you guys have questions, you put up your hand and wait for a microphone to come to you. I know everyone is so loud and crystal clear that everyone in here can hear you, but they can't hear you on the internet, no matter how loud as well. So that's all. Thank you.
Sarah, thanks very much. It was a great talk. Could you talk a little bit about the coals, like up at Finger Lakes, and
Oh,
and a little bit about where they come from and what their age is?
yeah. Okay. Well, I'll do my best because the coal seams at Finger Lakes are, to my knowledge, they're Mississippian, but I could be wrong here slightly. Most of the coal is Pennsylvanian. And that's a lot of strip mining up there. So they're specific seams in these sort of low topographic, ancient topographic areas. So they're not entire layers of coal that we see in places like the Book Cliffs. So they're very localized. So I want to say that they probably are Mississippian. And unfortunately, I don't think we have a lot of records of the types of fossils we got out of that material. It was kind of bulldozed out. And you would be hard pressed to find all that much coal left there. Yeah, it's been pretty much stricken clean. So I can't really answer to the fullest there. I could do a little bit more digging on what that is. Yeah.
What would be a holy grail style fossil to find in Missouri?
Oh, so there are these fossil deposits we call Lagerstätten, the mother lode, essentially. And these deposits are where you've got sort of the perfect acme of all suites of preservation. And what that means is you're preserving soft parts. So with a lot of the fossils you've just seen, they mostly have hard parts to them. You know, gastropods and mollusks, they have a shell. Trilobites have a shell. Crinoids have a shell. Plants are a little bit more delicate. They're mostly carbon. But there are plenty of things like jellyfish and let's see what else. Soft corals. Plenty of arthropods have soft, delicate bits that just don't make it into these types of fossil deposits. And so you need like a special condition where things are rapidly buried. You get rid of pretty much all of the access to scavengers, you're good. And you remove oxygen from the scene as well, so you don't get any bacterial decay. And around Missouri, the only place I've seen like potentially any sort of soft or at least chitinous preservation is actually the Lamotte sandstone in the Cambrian period, which is weird because usually you don't see fossil deposits in sandstones. But I think it's a fine enough sandstone that you're getting it. The best places you get this is in mudstones. We don't have a lot of mudstone in Missouri. Yeah, so that would be what we would hope for if we found some good mudstones that weren't completely annihilated by biotubation, which is burrowing of animals. We do have some, again, in the Cambrian where there's nice calci mudstones, but they've been reworked so thoroughly by trilobites and worms, and you just see burrows galore. So nothing is surviving that fossil from the perspective of fossilization. Yeah. Yeah.
So
you were mentioning horsetails
Yeah.
throughout the thing. Is that the same equisetum we have now?
So it's not the same, it'll be the same general family, but certainly not the same genus. It's going to be, you know, again, sort of like this distant cousin of it that is now extinct, and its ancestors have made its way through.
So how many other ancestor, how many descendant cousins can we find in the fossil record that are still with us?
Ooh, I mean, a lot. um, I'll use the ginkgo as an example. Are people familiar with ginkgo trees? So that particular genus has been around for a very, very long time, and it still persists to today. There are a few taxa or species. I don't know, species isn't the right term. It's more like just groups of organisms that have made their way through, but they've diversified in new ways away from the survivors that have made their way through big extinctions. So they're not the same exact thing. They look similar, but they're not the same. Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah.
So over here, there's like some teeth. You have that one extremely large tooth, but
Yeah.
there's also some more over here
Mhm.
that I think we've kind of heard are Ice Age 10,000 years or
Yes.
something like that. Like, is a tooth like that that's 10,000 years old, is it still a tooth like chemically, or has it changed into something else?
So this is something we call recrystallization, and with the mineral that makes up most of our teeth, which is bioapatite, it's pretty resilient to chemical alteration. So it probably is still very much the original, but you might have added in a couple of additional things along the way. So again, with anything that's pretty porous, silica likes to find its way in and deposit that mineral inside it. So you'll get silicification, aka chertification, of a lot of porous things, and especially in rivers, if they're just hanging out in water, you just get precipitation of those minerals in there. But the apatite should be pretty like non-recrystallized, so it'll be original. I should have mentioned there are a few sites around Missouri where we do get Ice Age fauna, things like mastodons and mammoths. There is a site over just north of St. Louis called the Mastodon site. Haven't had a chance to get there, would love to, but they extracted a whole bunch of wonderful mastodon material. This is not a mastodon, this is a mammoth, and this is a mammoth tooth. I'm holding it up the wrong way. There we go. This is the top. Mastodon teeth look very different. They actually look like giant molars, okay, like kind of like our molars, and a little bit sharper, actually. They have sort of these more prominent molar features to them, whereas our mammoths don't. You should keep an eye out on the river for megafauna remains. That's honestly where we find most of them, is either in sinkholes or in riverbeds. They get washed out usually from sinkholes, because that's one of the common places we see cave fauna and large organisms getting trapped or falling into them and dying. And so you get these wonderful cave deposits. Yeah. So keep an eye out for those as well. And there are dinosaurs in Missouri as well, also in ancient cave deposits where they've actually seen dinosaurs fall down into sinkholes, which is kind of cool. And hopefully, actually, in the not too distant future, I'll be running a trip down to kind of it's I forget the exact site now, but it's southeast Missouri area, where you can go see those. Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty neat. Okay. Well, I'm happy to look at some specimens if that works. And I'm also happy to talk about the ones I've got up here. The last thing I'll mention, here we go. Last thing I'll mention is if you're looking for good places to like go look at rocks, has anybody seen this book before? This is the Rock Climbing Guide to Missouri. And you got to have rocks to climb. So they have a bunch of great places to go check out. I'm excited. I'm going to go look at some of these bluffs just to see what I can find. And it's rare to find a perfect guide of like, hey, come to this bluff and look at it. So there we go. All right.
Sarah, that was so amazing. Thank you so much. Thank you for bringing all of your cool things. Thank you for offering to peruse through people's treasures that
Absolutely.
they brought, which is cool. Thank you to all of you that brought your treasures.
Yes.
And this is a bigger crowd than we usually have for the Big Money Speaker Series. And I imagine some folks are new. Is there anyone who hasn't been here before? Most of you, cool.
Okay. Woo. Yes.
That's awesome. This is a speaker series that happens the second Tuesday of every month, almost every month. And there's some topic related to the Missouri River. It's hosted by Missouri River Relief, which is a nonprofit based here in Columbia that connects people to the Missouri River. So we're always trying to get interesting presenters to come in here. So if you really enjoyed Sarah's talk, hopefully you'll check out our website, check out our Facebook page, either Missouri River Relief or Big Muddy Speaker Series, and find some more things that tickle your fancy, dig a little deeper into that. I'm also going to throw up a slide that has a QR code where you can get onto our email newsletter list. We forgot our sign up form tonight. Or if you hate QR codes, I'll put a piece of paper out and you can write your name and email address and we'll add you to the newsletter. So I think that's it. I also wanted to thank David Owens for helping us with the sound.
Yes.
Does an amazing job. And I do want to point, yes, thank you. And Trevor Harris almost single-handedly put all the tables and chairs up tonight. So if anyone wants to stick around afterwards and help with that, that'd be cool. And then I also wanted to point out that Sarah's husband, Tim, brought in one of his hand-carved paddles, Tim Sanders. He does a lot of these and they're all amazing creative works of art. So this is
a special one actually on the topic of exceptional deposits. This has been modeled off of several exceptional Cambrian deposits. This lovely beastie here is Anomalocaris, a Cambrian predator. And then we've got basically an image of the Burgess Shale on the other side. And again, one of these sites where you just get the entire fauna preserved. It's an exceptional site. I haven't been there, but I want to go. So come check it out.
awesome. Thanks for showing us that. And thank you to all of you. And Sarah's going to check out some of the treasures that you brought in.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Sarah.